Welcome back to the Emerald Knight, Part 20, Tadpoles. So in writing this part, I had a difficult time writing most of it, because for some of my recording sessions, I was, I felt very distracted, and it was just one of those days, or one of those times that I felt as if I had a physical barrier in the way of me being able to really focus and get into it, get into the writing. And I'm always so frustrated when I feel that way, because I'm just trying to write, but it's just not coming out, and and absolutely nothing that I put on the page feels good at all. It all just looks terrible. Like it's a bunch of mud that I'm just slathering on the page. But it was that, as well as trying to implement this, the voice, the new narrative, or the opinionated, or the operative narrative voice that I spoke of in part 19, where we can get sort of an idea on how the knight operates, like how she processes and operates. Trying to implement that simultaneously while feeling walled off from being able to write was a disastrous combination. But moving into part 20 from part 19, where we got an idea on what Aranthis is going through. Like, the previous section was about her and us following her, the narrative following her and understanding what she's feeling and going through. And now we have the knight, and I wanted to use this operative narrative voice. From here on out, I'm just going to call it opinionated voice for the sake of simplicity, but I wanted to use this opinionated voice to get a glimpse of how the knight interprets how Aranthis is acting and feeling in this moment, as compared with how Aranthis actually feels. Because we know how Aranthis feels, but the knight does not. At least not yet. So she is taking in this information and these responses from Aranthis as like pathetic and disrespectful and just annoying and aggravating. And I wanted, I don't feel I was completely successful with it, but I wanted to portray like the distance, like the dissonance between what the knight thinks about Aranthis in this moment as compared to what we know Aranthis feels. But as I say, at least in the rough draft, I kind of feel that I didn't portray that successfully, at least not entirely. Another thing about the voice is that a lot of it feels forced. At least I feel that I was trying to force it as I was writing it. And as I said in part 19, this section of the book, the narrative voice may benefit better from keeping a distance from the knight rather than funnel through her mind, because then of that the reader gets a wider space to interpret and imagine the type of person the knight is from seeing only their actions and expressions and the things that she says and so forth. This type of voice does feel a little restrictive, and when I read that part of Stephen King's It in part 19, Stephen King may have used that because maybe we never see this character again. Beverly's husband. I mean, I don't know. I haven't read the whole thing, but that sort of thing, using that sort of voice for a character we see maybe once is perhaps more optimal because we get a broader idea of who this person is rather than just the few actions that they take. I mean, imagine that. I mean, I know I didn't read the whole section to in part 19, but imagining that whole section without that opinionated voice, it would just feel. I feel that it would feel very bland. At the very least, there would need to be a lot of adjustment to the narrative voice to accommodate for the lack of intimacy with Tom, so to speak. So using that opinionated narrative voice that is funneled through a character's mind as if they are telling the story, may be beneficial for a shorter section or like a singular appearance of a character. At least concerning a longer narrative like this, especially when it's told between two different characters and concerns a lot of stuff, potentially a lot of stuff. I mean, it is a fantasy story. That sort of opinionated voice may not be so useful in narrating and telling and writing this fantasy world. Am I saying that it's impossible or impractical? No. But it would certainly be tricky. At least for me it would be. I'm not used to writing that way. But getting the voice where it's at a remove, or like more objective rather than opinionated, may be more beneficial to the reader's imagination or interpretation of this fantasy story. But I feel sort of conflicted because I have this opinionated part, and like I said, I was trying to portray like the dissonance between how we know Aranthus feels and how the knight interprets Aranthus's actions and feelings and whatever. So that has me conflicted. Should I take this voice out or should I keep it in? I mean, it would be awkward to just have this one spot in the entire story that's opinionated. So, something to debate with myself in the future. Maybe implement other opinionated parts, of course, but I don't know. It's too soon to tell right now. Now, moving on to this memory, this flashback the knight has, I before I sat down to write, I did have a general idea of what I wanted to write, of what this memory was to be. The names of the knight's sisters as well, I thought up before sitting down to write. I have a list of names, and the names of her sisters, I kind of altered some of the names that I have on that list. But yes, the memory had to do with tadpoles and imagery of like river, lake, something that was similar to what Aranthis was doing. And what ended up happening was something similar to previous parts with Aranthis, in that as I was trying to weave in this memory, I was creating backstory on the fly and like spontaneously creating characters out of thin air. Because originally the knight was not going to have sisters. Like, originally the figure by the river or the lake, it was originally a lake, but then I'm like, well, maybe I should change it to a river. I don't know. But originally the figure was going to be her mother. But then I thought, well, what if she has siblings? And then elder sister came into being. And then as I moved on down the line of the memory, there came her sister, her younger sister. And then the boy came out of it, because, you know, these are kids playing in a river. Why wouldn't they, more than just siblings, be playing in the river? So let's include another child in the memory. But therein lies the thing that really gets to the knight in the end. The inability to remember that boy's name. And then that just sends her down a road of not being able to recall entirely her family's, the way her family looks, their faces, their voices. And thus we have where we end part 20. Now, part 20 is short because though I recorded over 3 hours, a lot of that was not spent writing. A lot of that had to do with me feeling walled off from being able to write. Hopefully when I sit down to write again, it will not be so boxed in. And with that being said, I will see you in the next part. Thank you.